Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the EO, whatever this is, event, Inc. 5000 event. So thank you for coming. I know we have a lot of guests here that are not EO members. Can everybody hear me okay? Is this thing, it sounds a little echoey. Is it all right? Turn it up, is that what I'm hearing? I don't know how to turn it up, but Kira's got it. Ladies and gentlemen, Kira! Woo! Thank you, Kira. So this check. Can you guys hear me in back there? Can you hear me all the way in back? Yeah, we're good? All right. So we have a lot of guests here that are not EO members. If you see somebody with a yellow tag, right, yellow?
Yeah. Well,
Yellow, or I don't know, just introduce yourself to people.
Some are members, some are yellow.
Raise your hand if you're from out of town, if you're not from the Boston area. All right, New Jersey right here. Where else? Florida. New Jersey and Florida. Well, I've got a treat for you guys because you guys are going to meet the most Boston fucking woman you've ever met in your life. Ladies and gentlemen, we got Rhonda Coleman. Fucking Rhonda Coleman here. Rhonda also fuck yeah. Also known as historically, right? I think this goes back a ways, but the Queen of Beer. There was a documentary about Rhonda Coleman. So Rhonda was started in secretary school. And I can say that because that's actually what it was called back in the 80s.
Started in bartending school, which was the school of hard knocks, but that's a different story.
So, well, then we may get into that story tonight. I got to fire my dog who did my research. So Rhonda started way back there in bartending school. Actually, that's very relevant
No,
to
I
the
didn't
story.
go to bartending school. It was a school of hard knocks. See, get it?
And then I
Bartending now. Yeah.
And then
I was a secretary.
And then secretary school. And that's when she met Jim Cook. And she and Jim Cook started a Boston Beer Company, otherwise known as Sam Adams. So she's the co-founder of Sam Adams. Went for... Now, Sam Adams was 150 years ago when the microbrewing rage was brewing, so to say. And then she went and started another beer company called New Century Brewing, correct? Mm-hmm. Edison Beer, which is a light beer, and then there was also Moonshot, which was a caffeinated beer, ultimately led to the downfall, right? When the FDA said no caffeine and alcohol. So we're going to get to that story too. And then, guess what Rhonda did? She started the Boston Harbor fucking Distillery. And that's
I'll
where we
drink
are
to that.
now.
Cheers,
so, ladies and gentlemen, Rhonda Coleman.
Woo! Sorry, we're just spitballing here, right, Dave?
We're just spitballing. I haven't thought about this at all. So we're gonna do a little interview here. Rhonda and I have known each other for about 10 years. In fact, this is bringing me back a bit to when I first met you. Actually, shortly after I met you, we had a sandwich on your front deck in one of your houses in Cohasset. I say one of her houses because she's moved around a number of times since then. But I remember sitting with Rhonda on her front deck, eating a sandwich, and just being in complete awe, talking to this woman that had such an amazing journey in the spirits industry. And here we are 10 years or so later, sitting next to each other eating fish and chicken. So thank you for sitting with me and doing this again.
Thank you for feeding me.
You're welcome. So I'd like to take us through the journey, take us through Rhonda's journey. Now, I've done a number of these interviews through the EO podcast, and the way I like to do these things is we get into the human element of the story. We're probably not going to learn how to make a distillery. We're probably not going to learn how to start a company, but we are going to learn all about Rhonda and her journey tonight. Does that sound all right?
Yep.
All right.
Well, thank you. We're holding them all captive.
So Rhonda,
here.
cheers.
Cheers.
Cheers to it, and cheers to all of you guys. Here's
Raise
to
a glass, right? Entrepreneurship. Here we are.
Now, I also want you guys to think of a few questions because when I'm done, I'd like to open it up to you guys to ask some questions. And, that could go good or bad. Totally ad lib. All right, so Rhonda, let's take it back a ways. Take me all the way back. I want to. You were born in fucking Lynn, is that right? Is that?
I was born in fucking Lynn.
And
in Lynn Hospital. It doesn't exist anymore, and I was a New Year's baby. You were born in Lynn Hospital? Wait a minute.
Lynn Hospital, everybody.
23.
Fucking Lynn Hospital.
But I don't think you know this. I was a New Year's baby. I was the first baby born.
On January 1st or December 31st?
4 minutes past midnight, so I made it January 1st. So I started my father said I was born with a party spoon in my mouth. He wasn't wrong, yeah. But he was an accountant, and I was 4 minutes into the next year, so he was very upset about that. Every year, for years and years and years, I had to hear about it. That's okay, he's dead. No. No, he is. It's okay.
I think Rhonda's like me. We start to joke and get a little silly when we're nervous.
Yeah, we joke every time.
That's
why we've been friends for 10 years.
So
Who
Rhonda,
could stand him?
take me. Where do you want to start? School of Hard Knocks, or do you want to start with the secretary school?
Is there a difference?
How old were you when you went to learn how to be a bartender? How old were you when you?
I started bartending when I was 15 years old. In Peabody, Massachusetts. Peabody? We got a Peabody in the room. Yes.
So this is perfect because this is what I wanted tonight to be. I wanted you guys to get to know Rhonda. And Rhonda, starting with the story of how she started bartending at 15 years old in Peabody, this is perfect. Like this, I couldn't have made up a better start to this interview. So you start bartending in Peabody. At some point, you're like, I got to get a real job, and you're like, I got to go to secretary school. Is that what happens?
No, I was always straight A student. I was good at school, but I didn't want like the 4-year school. I didn't want to go live somewhere and kind of be in jail for 4 years. I wanted to do my own thing. So I went to North Shore Community College and got a 2-year degree in secretarial science. It's top of my class, and I know everything about typing and shorthand and organization and planning. Very important today because everything's on a computer. I've been doing this for years, so I'm pretty efficient, I must tell you.
Rhonda, what year was that?
Really?
Ish. All right, never mind.
No.
That was 2008.
It's fine, I don't care. 1980, I graduated.
80.
80.
All right, so this is a journey, right? So at 80, secretary school, you leave secretary school, you start working. At some point, you get a job working for Boston Consulting Group.
Boston Consulting Group.
And
which I'm sure you guys know Boston Consulting, like at the top of the food chain.
Is that in Boston?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, as opposed
well,
to
they're
on the
worldwide,
outskirts.
and you have to have a Harvard or a Yale or Stanford or Oxford degree to be part of that club.
Oxford, really?
Oxford, yes. London School of Economics, yep. Top of the food chain.
And so when you were at BSG, you meet Jim.
Jim Cook, yeah.
And so tell me about that relationship. Tell me how that led to you guys leaving.
So Jim Cook, you guys know who we're talking about? Yep. He's the 6th consecutive oldest son to be a brewer in his family. The recipe for Sam Adams really, really was his great-great-grandfather's. And he was a management consultant that had 3, not 1, but 3 Harvard degrees. And he was at the top of his game. Jack Welch from GE was one of his clients. So Jim was really a manufacturing consultant, and he was one of 7 people that I supported as a secretary with an IBM Selectric typewriter because there were no computers and there were no cell phones. So, yep, that's the age. And somehow you end up here, but that's good. And so Jim knew about beer, knew about business, and he recognized that there was a white space for good beer making right here in Boston. Because a lot of trends in the food and drink industry, they start San Francisco north, and they eventually come to New England. And he saw that there was an opportunity, and he had his great-great-grandfather's recipe, and he knew about beer and business, but he didn't know about bars. And that's where I came in. He asked me to help him start a beer company in 1983. And I said, well, Jim, guess what? I don't drink beer. I drink whiskey. And he promised that he would make something that I would like, and of course he did. So together we started the Boston Beer Company, and we had nothing more than just our commitment and our unbridled passion, and it was Boston's beer made in Pittsburgh that was $5 more a case than Heineken. That was a dark beer that nobody ever heard of and didn't like around here, but we turned it into something pretty quickly.
So I had no idea that you had this passion for whiskey
I did.
back then.
I did. My father used to drink whiskey and fall asleep in the chair, you know, like we all do sometimes. And I would drink it when I was a little girl. I loved it. I've always loved everything about whiskey.
Fucking Boston!
Right? Right, Francesca? My whiskey drinking friend. And so that's it. And ironically, I've come full circle because the process, we make everything here. Everything that's been in your glass tonight, I'm so proud of my team and everybody here, we make it right here. And by law, we can only serve what we make here. So I can serve you 130 proof whiskey, but I can't serve you a light beer. Welcome to Massachusetts, everybody. Fucked up. Anyway, so yeah, that's what we do right here. So the process for whiskey starts off the same process as beer does. I really have come full circle. If you haven't tried our Spirit of Boston, it's those little bottles that are literally distilled Sam Adams beer. So we wait for them to make it, freshest beer you could possibly find. And instead of them putting it into a bottle or a keg, we truck it over here and we run it through our still a couple of times and we lay it down in our barrel room back there for 3 or 4 or 5, now I think 6 years. And it drinks like a whiskey, but it's actually a beer. It's really fantastic. I've trademarked the evolution of beer. It's coming. And that's been my problem. I'm always about 10 years ahead for some reason.
So you were telling me the other day that the whiskey industry is very much where the beer industry was in the 80s when you got into that. And the beer industry in the 80s, can you describe it? Like, what was it like in the 80s? What did Sam Adams do? And how does that compare to what you're doing now?
Well, in the 80s, when we started Boston Beer Company, which officially was 1984, it was a very pale, bland landscape of yellow, fizzy beers. You know, Coors wasn't even in Boston yet, if you can believe that. It was like Miller and Bud and Busch. And the only thing really different about them was the labels, because they were made with corn, which is an adjunct, which is a filler, which is lighter, which is cheaper, which is sweeter. America has a tendency to drink sweet. And when Jim saw the opportunity to make a better beer here in Boston, where people are educated and they should care about what goes inside their body and what they're drinking, he made Sam Adams out of his great-great-grandfather's recipe, and that's an all-natural, passes the Reinheitsgebot, but there's no corn. And fast forward, I guess almost 40 years later, here we are at Boston Harbor Distillery, and we make whole grain whiskey. We don't use corn.
So you're saying it's good for you, whiskey?
I think so. It makes you feel good. And if you drink well-made stuff, which we do here, I hope you all come for a VIP tour one Saturday, or before we have live music one night, we do tours. We'll teach you all about how we do it. But what's different is the poster child for American whiskey is bourbon. Bourbon, by law, it's the most regulated business in the country. By law, it has to be made from a majority of corn. And I had to draw a line in the sand. We don't make bourbon here. It's kind of like having a brewery and not making an IPA today. It's death, and I knew that, and I've made this mistake before, but I'm making the mistake again, is that, there's 10, 12 million barrels of bourbon laying down in Kentucky and Tennessee. How do I compete with that? It's legacy. They've been at it for, since, well, actually, the very first whiskey made in America was from George Washington. He made rye whiskey, and that's our flagship. If anybody's drinking an old-fashioned tonight, that's our flagship, rye whiskey. And our pride and joy is the single malt, and it's 100% malted barley. It's just what we did at Sam Adams. So it's proof that Americans can make great whiskey too, because today the gold standard for world whiskey is Scotch, or Japanese whiskey, or Australian whiskey, or Indian whiskey. Single malt is the gold standard. Well, there's a small coalition of us craft distillers in America that are trying to make single malt, an American single malt, part of the landscape. Can you believe that it is not recognized as a category by the federal government in the United States? I mean, so we're innovating in a, hundreds-year-old business. And that's what I've been doing for 40 years, I guess. And I don't know why. I just keep doing it. I do it because I love entrepreneurship, and I know there's so many like-minded people in this room, and my passion happens to be what goes in my glass every day. So here we are. Thank you very much.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think entrepreneurship oftentimes is we're looking for opportunities, right? Looking for holes in the market. And in the 80s, the hole in the market was craft beers. And now there's literally tens of thousands of craft beers. Is that fairly accurate to say?
Oh, yeah.
But it started with, I think it was under 100 craft beers.
When we started in 84, 85, when we launched, there were less than 35 breweries in the United States. So to say that, Jim and I, we're at the forefront of it is an understatement.
And so now spirits you told me spirits have surpassed beer in market share of alcohol. Is that right?
For the first time ever, yes. And why? Why?
I'll tell you why, Rhonda, because they're gluten-free, they're lower calorie, they're versatile, and they last longer. What does that mean, they last? Oh, they last longer, meaning you can hold on to them longer, right?
Well, beer is best consumed when it's fresh. So once it's packaged, it's like a new car when you drive it off the lot.
What else can I tell you about whiskey? Did you know that Scotch was made in Scotland?
How about Irish whiskey?
What?
Irish whiskey.
Germany, I think. So Rhonda, you mentioned a few minutes ago mistakes you've made.
Oh.
And I think yet that's another, sadly, it's another important part of entrepreneurship, right? Mm. Entrepreneurship really is a series of mistakes until you find something that sticks. I think I know you well enough to know that New Century Brewing, I wouldn't necessarily say that the whole entity was a mistake, but there were things that came out of that I'm sure were rather frustrating. Can you talk about that story? What happened in that chapter?
So I'll just bridge the gap a little bit.
Sure.
So Jim Cook and I started Boston Beer Company in 1984. We launched in 85. I spent 15 years helping make Sam Adams and other brands like Twisted Tea a household name. And we went public, and I was always just behind a conference room table and with people that I didn't have a ton of respect for because they didn't know the business like I knew the business. And of course, I'm a woman, can you tell? And I have a recognition award as being the pioneering woman in the beer industry. There were no women. There were no women.
The Queen of Beer. There was
crazy.
a documentary about this called The Queen of Beer, right?
No, it's Beer Wars. That's another story.
Oh, Beer Wars. Okay.
There's so many stories. But the reason why I'm telling you that, I left Boston Beer Company and I started another beer company called New Century Brewing Company. It was the first brewing company of the new millennium. And I was inspired by Jim Cook's brewing consultant, who happened to be the man who invented light beer in 1967. And when he read I left Boston Beer, of course we knew each other. He's like, oh, I'll make a beer, you start a company. I couldn't compete with Sam Adams, nor did I want to. So I called him back and I said, Joe, you invented light beer like 40 years ago. Can't we do it better? And so we did. And I created this beer called Edison. And it was made from scratch to be light by the man who invented light beer. So Edison, of course, that play on. And I launched it in Las Vegas at the Beer Wholesalers Convention on the eve of 9/11. And so, yeah, we had one great day of launch, and then then you know what happened. And I was launching in New York and Boston, two markets that you probably didn't want to start a new business on 9/11. But I did, and I kept it going, and I persevered. And then I'm out there, I'm aware, and I started to see what people were drinking, and they were drinking Starbucks, and they were drinking Red Bull, and they were drinking even Mountain Dew, like this Code Red crap stuff, but it was flying. And they all had the same thing in common, which is caffeine. So there's $100 billion of beer consumed annually in the United States at this time, and it's now like $125 billion. $100 billion worth of beer consumed in the United States, and if you were a beer lover and wanted to pick me up, you had to leave beer to go to like god-awful Red Bull and vodka or an Irish coffee or
Four Loko, right?
Jack and Coke. Well, this was before Four Loko.
Wow.
So I called up my brewing consultant and I asked him to make me a beer with caffeine. He hung up the phone on me. And I called him back and I told him the business reasons why. And 2 days later, he called me back and said, we can do it. So I launched Moonshot, which today is a great name. Moonshot, 69 milligrams of caffeine, which, by the way, is the year the astronauts landed on the moon. And it's just less than a cup of Folgers coffee. It's just enough so that if you wanted a little pick-me-up and you're a beer drinker, well, Joe died. He was my brewing consultant. He was in his 80s. He was sick. I hired another guy who gave my patented process of adding caffeine to beer and ale to Four Loko and Panther Juice, the crap in a can, 12% alcohol, 269 milligrams of caffeine. It was a speedball in a can. A bunch of college kids were puking and getting sick, so all of a sudden it was an epidemic, and they had to get it shut down. So the FDA shut down caffeinated alcohol, and I got caught in that net. So I was just ready to scale the company. It was finally, after 10 years, just ready to go, until it wasn't. And you know, when life hands you lemons as entrepreneurs, we have to pivot. I hate that word, but we pivot. And this is what led me here. It's the same reason that Jim Koch saw the white space for great craft beer in America, made in Boston. Well, that's what I'm doing right here. And you guys are all part of this journey right now because you're sitting in this room. So thank you for being here. But that's what we're doing with whiskey. And being an innovator in any business is a long, lonely road. It takes a lot of money, it takes a lot of time, and it takes a lot of guts and perseverance. In my business today, being undercapitalized, because that's what happens for startups, it's 10 years and probably $10 million. And I'm about 7.5%, 75% of the way there. Because I've been here 7.5 years, and we've been making stuff, and we've been serving stuff. It's 10 years, so we're closing that gap, and I hope you can taste in the glass. Thank you. You know, my staff, my team here, they see the good, the bad, and the ugly. Davis showed me this entrepreneurial chart on Zoom the other day, and it's like a day in the life of an entrepreneur. Oh, it's great. Oh, it sucks. Oh my God, I want to kill myself. Right? But this is this roller coaster, and I have been on it for so long, continuing to reinvent, not myself, but my businesses. And you know, if anybody's going to do it, it's going to be me, because I'm not stopping now. Because what we're doing is the right thing, and we just index the Northeast index is the lowest for craft anything It just takes a long time up here. We're hard. We know we work hard for our money. We spend our money on things we know. So new things just take longer, but it's just all in a day's work. So anyway, I'm doing all the talking you're supposed to.
Yeah, you're right. I should be doing more of the talking here, right? So did I hear a boo? Mark? So we're talking about some of the highs and lows in entrepreneurship and the perseverance, and you mentioned that chart. Well, I think it was sometime around, maybe, help me with the timeline here, but at a certain point early in the days of New Century Brewing, you learn that you have breast cancer. And clearly a breast cancer survivor. Talk to me a little bit about your experience in hearing something so impactful at a time when you're starting a new business.
Saved by the bell. Thank God the phone's ringing. No, it was actually, I was into it at that point, into the company. It was 2008. My husband, Matt, is actually the man who built this beautiful building.
Give us a wave, Matt.
He's bartending tonight. He's helping us out, but we have 3 children, and they were all between the ages of 6 and 12 at the time when you got that, that diagnosis of having breast cancer. And it was, pretty devastating stuff, but what are you going to do? You're just going to fight and you're going to get through it. And it was a long road. And, we came from the doctor, and I had to have a mastectomy and, all this stuff. But they said, it was Dana-Farber. We're so lucky. We're here in Boston. It was Dana-Farber. And, they said the good, bad, and the ugly. And it's not going to be fun, but you're going to live. I'm like, okay, that's all I needed to hear. And, the business was really tough back then. And, I said to Matt, maybe I should just shut my beer company down. It's tough. Maybe I should spend time on myself. And about 10 minutes later, I said, then what the hell would I do? Sit here and watch the grass grow? No, I need this business. Let's go. And I actually opened in Los Angeles. I was on planes. I figured it out. And obviously, I survived. And that was 15 years ago. Kids are better off for it. The worst part was when I lost my hair, my husband decided to shave his too. The kids were like, oh, you are not driving us to school. Do not even think about it. Anyway, it's part of the journey, and we're all survivors. Every day, we're survivors.
Well, that in particular is a story that only a woman can share. And speaking of being a woman, do you like that transition there?
What do you have to tell us, Dave?
Way to use breast cancer. Way to use breast cancer as a transition, Dave. High five. So, but being a woman in the spirits industry from the 80s all the way to today, first of all, I would imagine there's not a lot of women in spirits. Is that accurate?
It's a changing world since the 80s.
But I mean, in the 80s. Let's go back to the 80s.
Oh, that was beer, but yeah.
So in beer, right. So it's not spirits or not beer, right? So back in the days of your beer journey, you're not bumping into a lot of women at the distribution, at the bars, and...
I wasn't. And that's okay. I'm from Boston. I'm from Lynn, even better, fucking Lynn. Anyway. No, I mean, we have thick skin. This is a drinking town. It's always been known as a drinking town, although they won't let you have a happy hour anymore here. But I'm okay with that. It's all about who you are and your own constitution. I've always believed in myself and my abilities, even when some people didn't. They're like, how did you end up putting caffeine in beer and nobody else did? I'm like, I don't know. Stupid fucks. I figured it out. People have ideas all day long. I heard time and time again, oh, I had that idea. My friend and I, well, did you do anything about it? No. So I've always believed in myself and my abilities. It's a man's business. In the liquor business is even a lot harder than beer. they're all, beer guys, and there's legacies. A lot of the beer distributors started in 1933 when Prohibition ended, so it's their grandfathers and their fathers and their fathers. And you're dealing with the sons of and people that have always been in the industry, but they had never seen anything like Sam Adams before. Nobody actually took the time to educate people. These guys have been in the beer business their whole life. Their parents, they didn't even know how beer was made. So at the end of the day, we've heard about a maker's movement. We hear about craft. I mean, California, those guys live it. We only talk about it here in Boston, but it's time because we know the difference of putting good stuff in, good stuff out. Makes you feel better. You don't feel like crap. Like there's all these reasons for it, but it's still taking time to come here. And as a woman, I'm an educator. This is why I get up and do what I do. I'd love to make some money doing this. It's a hard business because everything that you see here has to be paid for. And we make whiskey and then we lay it down back there for a minimum of 4 years. Think about the ROI on that. It is liquid gold once it goes in the barrels, if you can get somebody to buy it. 4 years, 5 years, 6 years, 7 years later. It's a real different business model, but it's a good one. But at the end of the day, what makes this different is what's inside that bottle and why we do it differently. And it's taking the time to educate. And that's what this whole front of the house here is for, is we have people come in here all the time, take tours, learn. And that's what Jim Cook and I did with Sam Adams. We literally had nothing. We didn't even have a brewery. It was Boston beer made in Pittsburgh. But we went door to door, bar to bar with a jar of hops and a jar of malted barley and a jar of corn. And we said, that's what the other guys are using, and we're using this. And look what happened. It was an $11 billion market cap not too long ago. That's pretty freaking cool. If I had held on to my shares, it would be a lot cooler, let me tell you. But I didn't. It doesn't matter. But that's I've been here before. This is a parallel path. And I'll say it again, ironically, the process for beer starts off as the same, of whiskey starts off as the same process as beer. This is meant to be. It's the evolution of beer. Beer is big, and it's glutinous, and it's not that high in alcohol, so you need to have a lot of it. And it's, gassy. On a date, it's not so cool. But then there's this. I could sip this all night long. It's good. It's really good. And so we take all the essence of what that beer is all about, and we concentrate those flavors, and we lay it down in wood and water and whiskey, make really good friends. So that's why I'm doing this.
So, Rhonda, I want to take us back to the conversation about women in business, and especially in your business. What have you seen change over the years, and what hasn't changed when it comes to women in business? Or entrepreneurship, even more so.
Yeah, well, thanks for asking, because there's a ton of women in the room, and that's unusual. Thank you for doing that. I mean, I used to go to the beer conventions. It was me and 1,200 guys. It was fun, let me tell you. You stood out, but for me, it's been very hard. For nearly 40 years, I've been at the forefront of craft alcohol in Boston, and there weren't like-minded people doing that. And it's really, the pandemic has changed a lot. And I'm part of this women's group called Let's Talk Women, that are founders or owners of restaurants or food and drink businesses. And we are celebrating each other for the first time. Like, it's really nice. And I think this is going to continue, and it needs to continue, and it should continue. I hate when women are part of the minorities, even though we are 51% of the population. I don't know what that's all about. But we can change it. We all have daughters, or will have them. I have some daughters, and I'll have some granddaughters, and we just have to change the narrative. But what hasn't changed is the money and the power. Politically, we are in a remarkable place here in Massachusetts because Maura Healey, Kim Driscoll, Michelle Wu, Deborah Goldberg, our treasurer, they all had their fundraisers right here in this room, their last fundraiser. I think these women are going to do remarkable things. We need change to happen, not just because they're women, but they have a sensibility that hasn't been around here for a long time. And so, but what's really still difficult is the money. You know, follow the money. It's still less than 2% of females are getting any funding. Why? Why is that, David?
I don't know, Rhonda.
Do you know?
No.
You can't help me?
So listen, I'm going to turn to you guys in a minute. Think of your questions. If you have any questions for Rhonda, just if you do, I want you to raise your hand real high. But before you do, I got one more question for you, Rhonda. Who are you targeting? I mean, this is a fairly high-end product on the market, right? So who is your target, and are you still going out? I mean, your specialty back in the day when you were educating the market was walking into the bars and educating them grassroots style. Who are you targeting, and how are you educating them?
That's a big question.
Okay, so no more questions from you guys.
No, if I can just take a second to tell you a little bit about this place, would that be okay with everybody? Because it is a beautiful room. It's a beautiful place to be. I just want you all you entrepreneurs in the room to know where you are. You are where this 18-acre parcel down here has been the center of entrepreneurial commerce since the mid-1800s. And it was started by this guy named Silas Putnam, who is the lineage of the Putnam family. The horse and rider on our label, on our whiskey label, is his uncle, General Israel Putnam, the Revolutionary War hero. And out of this port, they made horseshoe nails. And they had government contracts, and they supplied horseshoe nails to both sides of the Civil War out of here. Pretty remarkable stuff. And they were very successful doing that. So if you can imagine this whole port of buildings just like this. So there's only two left, this one and the winery across the parking lot. And when the car came in, there was no need for horseshoe nails anymore. And then the next notable entrepreneur to have commerce was the George Lawley shipyard. And so the Putnam was the inspiration for our whiskey, and the Lawleys is inspiration for our fresh botanical gin and our small batch New England style rum line. And Lawley's actually, again, built America's Cup winning yachts that grace our label, and they also built minesweepers for World War II right here in this building. They too had government contracts, so they were very successful. But when the war ended, they went out of business, and the last notable entrepreneur to have commerce here was the Seymour's Ice Cream Factory. And if anybody's born and raised here, you've probably heard of the Hoodsy and the Nutty Buddy, and this was the ice cream factory, and our barrel room is part of their freezer, which is pretty awesome. And that was the inspiration for our confectionery line of espresso martinis, maple cream, which will blow Bailey's away, and our coffee liqueur, which is Kahlua, 10 times better, which is on the back bar of every bar in America. So what we're doing here is just carrying on the tradition of craftsmanship and passion and entrepreneurship. Happens to be in a bottle. There's lots of history and quality and passion that goes into every one of them. And we're just doing what feels right and what tastes right. And I hope you guys really enjoyed everything here. And again, what was the question?
Don't worry about it. Actually, that was a much better question. Could you tell us about this building? So thank you.
Because you're all sitting here and it's lovely.
That was a far better question, because this is an amazing building. I'm really glad to be here. This is the second EO event we've had here in the past, 8-9 years. There was another event we did here, and so I remembered this, and I thought this is a perfect opportunity for us to take advantage of this place and have you on stage with us. There's some questions here in the audience, right back here. Yes.
Yeah. So I have two questions and 17 slides. first question is, so if I understand whiskey and bourbon as an industry correctly, I think it's the most volatile of all spirits. It has like these tremendous waves of low demand, and then times like now when the market's at a premium. So I'm just curious, where you've got so much aging back here, do you worry that it could fall out of style, or how confident are you that we're outstripping the decades of demand?
No, it's a really good question. I mean, and I think if you look at most industries, you'll see, you know, if you look back in history, and you'll see the trends. I mean, the 50s, of course, in the Mad Men era, you know, they're walking around with old fashions and whiskey in their glass. And then it fell out of favor and it went to white goods, and Smirnoff used to be the #1 selling vodka, you know. So there's always cyclical stuff. For me, I look at a category in its entirety by segments, really. And single malt whiskey, which is why, you know, I really wanted to start this place, was to prove that Americans can make great whiskey too, because single malt is like the gold standard for whiskey. And that's coming, that's coming. And I'm, you know, 10 years ago I saw that, and it's still not here yet. But I'm gonna be here when it gets here. And so I think there's segments of the business. The thing about bourbon, there's a lot of it, you know, and it's way overpriced for a lot of what it is. That's bourbon. The whole grain whiskey market, that's what we do here.
Rhonda, can I get a second question?
You may.
It's a good segue with the mention of bourbon. I would love to hear your take on Pappy at $1,000, $2,000, $3,000 a bottle.
Okay. I've never tried it. So I'll tell you, like, we started distilling 7.5 years ago, and there's some barrels back there that may not be 7.5 years old, but they may be 6, they may be 7. And the reason why they're still back there is because it didn't taste good. And so that's what happens to distilleries, because it's all about the wood, and if the wood has some bacteria or some bug, you know, it just, the wood will change the flavor profile. So they stash these barrels back there, the distillers do, and we'll come back because it just needs time. And evidently they mothballed this distillery, they shut it down, and there were just these barrels hanging out there. And that's really Pappy Van Winkle claim to fame. I don't know, if I paid $1,500 for a bottle, I don't know whether to keep it on my shelf or to open it. I don't know, what would you do?
I'm holding on to that.
For what? Like, what, you want to get buried with them? I'll tell you what, bring them here, I'll share them with you. And then I can really tell you my input. I don't know, I think it's fantastic. We're too new. Like, this is why the whiskey business is so hard. This is why people don't go into it, because I thought the beer business was difficult. Jim Koch and I competed against, you know, the Bushes and the Coors family and the Miller presidents, and lots of money, well-funded, smart people. They don't hold a candle to Pernod Ricard, William Grant, Brown-Forman. I mean, Louis Vuitton, Moet Hennessy, who's better than them at marketing? To me, that's the standard that I'm living by. And there's no reason why we can't continue the tradition of making excellence coming out of Boston. And that's what I'm trying to do. People tell me every day, why doesn't it say Boston Distillery in big letters? Well, it doesn't, because that's not why. People need to have a story, and they need to know what's in the bottle is really the utmost quality. That's what I'm working on, and it takes time, and it takes money, and it takes balls. And I don't have any balls. I have like a half a boob, but anyway. But it's all good. I mean, it's that perseverance, it's the vision, and working towards that. I'm sorry, I don't know where that came from.
Fucking Rhonda. Any other questions? Hey, Rhonda, stop talking. Any other questions?
Oh, I hate when they do those commercials.
Are there any other questions in the audience here?
Not a one.
All right. Oh, we got one more over here. That's the rowdy table, by the way, Rhonda. I was walking by that table. They were so noisy. I was trying to quiet everybody down. They wouldn't stop. Yeah. All right. More whiskey. Yes.
Loud and happy.
Rhonda, if you could sit down and have a glass of whiskey with anyone, dead or alive, who is he and why?
Ah, I love that.
I know exactly. Dr. James Swan. He was my first hire here, and he's a Scottish guy who's the world's expert on whiskey maturation. And I called him up and I said, hey, Dr. Swan, I want to start a whiskey distillery in Boston. And he laughed at me. And he said, young lady, if you want to learn about whiskey making, you need to meet me. And I thought he would say Scotland, but no, it was Taiwan. And I met him there. I went and met him in Taiwan, and what I learned is the most awarded whiskey in the world that Jim helped create was made in Taiwan. And, you know, they talk about age for whiskey and, you know, oh, this is a 25-year-old Macallan. Well, honestly, the most awarded whiskey in the world, if they didn't get it out of the barrel in 2 years, it would have turned to oak juice. Or they would have lost it to the angel's share. So my 90-year-old mother always said, age is just a number. I would like to have a glass of whiskey with my dad, actually, but he's not here either. But I go back to Jim Swan because this still that I got, he wanted me to buy Scottish stills, beautiful Scottish stills, you know, hundreds-year-old legacy of those big copper stills. And when I went to Taiwan, they had all the copper stuff, they had all the Scottish stuff, and I thought, you know what, I don't want to bring Scotland to Boston. I want to make American whiskey here in Boston. So I ended up going to the Vendome Copper Works, which is America's oldest copper distillery, and I bought the Econo model because that's all I could afford at the time. That was this thing. And Swan said to me, you're never going to make good whiskey out of that thing. Well, it turned out that I got rewarded for my decision because every piece of equipment that's used to make alcohol or ethanol has to have a little serial number. And this one happens to be 1776. 1776 ended up right here in Boston. I said to my husband, holy shit, I think we can make this work. And I'm telling you this story because Dr. Swan had a heart attack and he fell down the stairs in his home in Scotland in 2017, and he is no longer with us. And I never got to have a glass of whiskey from this still, and I think he would be proud, as I am. So here's to Dr. Swan.
If there's another one more question, and if not, I've got one to wrap up. All right.
Good, because
So-
I'm out of whiskey.
Rhonda, speaking of the whiskey you drink, I understand you like to have a drink every day. What's your drink of choice? You've got a whole store back here, and I hope everybody takes a second to go take home something from the store. Let's give Rhonda a little support by stopping in the store and picking something up. Rhonda, what do you recommend? Like, what is your drink of choice? If you were to come stock up your house with one thing, what would you go to back here?
Oh my gosh, Dave. It's like picking your favorite child, right?
Well, we all have one.
Well, for me, the answer to that is it depends on the time of day. Because I have a bottle of that maple cream, which is like Bailey's, only much better, right next to our coffee maker. My husband knows this. It's like, I don't really finish coffee unless it has maple cream in it. It's only 15% alcohol.
I'm not
it's
judging.
fine.
Yeah.
It's a perfect blend of cream and coffee. But no, I mean, I love whiskey. This is why I started this. I've loved whiskey ever since I was a little girl, and I think whiskey is the future of beer, frankly. You know, beer is awesome. It's America's beverage, and it's good. And there's a time and a place for beer, but I just think if people learn how to respect whiskey and drink good whiskey and whole grain whiskey, it's so versatile. You can have it neat, you could have it with one rock, you could have it with several rocks, you could have it in a cocktail. Like if you add water to it, it's okay. Water, whiskey makes good friends. Like Sometimes I have a glass of water and I add a little whiskey to it. Because water's so boring. Just like vodka. It's boring. It's an alcohol, yeah, he's drinking vodka. I didn't want to make fun of him, but I am now that we're on stage together.
So listen,
what are friends for?
It's Rhonda has been very generous to us in giving us this space. She's given us her time. I encourage you to take a look in that store and walk out of here with a little gift. Let's support Rhonda. Bring your babysitter a gift of whiskey. Bring your kids some whiskey. What better gift to warm the heart?
Cream in your coffee.
So let me end by saying this. We've got perseverance, innovation, guts. These are a few of the words I wrote down. Fucking Rhonda Coleman, people. Well done.
Thank you for being here. Grateful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mike.